Who am I? Am I beautiful? Am I good at maths? Am I a decent person? These questions, and others like them, are central to our sense of who we are. Yet the answer to these questions is not somewhere deep within us, in our hearts or minds or souls perhaps, but rather outside us, in the social world. According to social comparison theory, we learn about the self by comparing ourselves with those around us. Unlike self-comparison, the comparison of oneself with other subjective and often idealized versions of ourself, social comparison provides an objective benchmark for self-evaluation. Thoughts, feelings, and behaviors can all be assessed this way. Typically, when looking to evaluate our abilities, sporting prowess, say, or academic aptitude, we compare either upward with those we perceive to be better than us, or downward with those we perceive as inferior. Imagine you are running a marathon. An upward comparison might see you compare yourself with the top marathon runners in the world, leading you to conclude that you're not cut out for the marathon game. A downward comparison, meanwhile, might see you compare yourself to the charity runners in novelty costumes, from which you conclude that you're not so bad after all. However, an accurate self-evaluation would require a synthesis of both these views.
Social comparison is a key way that we understand the self in social psychology, in that it's a way that we build ourselves as people, that sense of what we call self-construal. Over time we come to understand ourselves, and it's also part of the way that we come to be on terms with ourselves and feel good about ourselves, which is called self-enhancement, the way we build ourselves up. In order to do that, we need to make comparisons between ourselves and others, and they can be helpful to us in that way. One of the classic examples that's often given of this is Olympic medal winners. People that win silver medals in the Olympics often don't feel as good as people winning bronze medals, which seems on the face of it to be upside down. Feels a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? The thinking behind it that's explained by social comparison theory is that the people that are winning the bronze medals are making downward social comparisons, which makes them feel better. They're thinking along the lines of, well, at least I finished fourth, I managed to get a medal. So that lifts them up, that enhances them. Whereas the people that won the silver medals, they're doing the opposite thing. They're thinking that they've just missed out on the gold medal, so they're making an upward social comparison. So it explains why they end up not feeling as good as the person that finished in the third position and got the bronze medal.
Generally speaking, people are motivated to see themselves in a good light, yet social comparison is not always conducive to this. Inevitably, we will encounter individuals who are objectively better than us in a given domain, such as athletics or mathematics, and this has consequences for our self-esteem. So, what can we do about this? Abraham Tesser, a prominent social psychologist, identified 4 strategies for dealing with such scenarios, known collectively as the self-evaluation maintenance model. Imagine you are the top mathematics student in your class. At the start of the semester, a new student joins your school, who, it soon emerges, is a better mathematician than you. How do you deal with this threat to your self-esteem? According to Tesser's model, strategy 1 is to exaggerate the ability of the target of your comparison. By labeling the new student a genius or a freak, the upwards comparison is rendered meaningless, since we are no longer comparing like with like. Strategy 2 is to change the target of your comparison. So, rather than comparing yourself to the genius student, you might assess your abilities in relation to other, less able classmates. Strategy 3 is to distance yourself from the target of comparison, both physically and emotionally. This might mean sitting apart from your rival or not talking to them, emphasizing the difference between you. Strategy 4 is to distance yourself from the domain of comparison, in this case mathematics. Yes, the new student is better at maths than me, but I never really cared for maths in the first place. And besides, I'm way better at sport than them. Each of these strategies helps to preserve our self-esteem in the face of negative social comparison. There is another form of social comparison that affects us all, not as individuals, but as members of groups. According to social identity theory, the self is comprised of elements of both our personal and social identities. Personal identities are self-schemas based on our own idiosyncrasies, such as personality traits, physical features, skills, and attributes. In contrast, social identities are self-schemas based on our membership of particular social groups, such as student, woman, American, or pensioner. These social identities are governed by group norms, shared ideas about how one should think and behave.
When we think of ourselves in relation to other people and groups in society, then a sort of process is followed. It starts off initially where we think about categorizing different groups of people. For example, I might see myself as a lecturer in a way that you might equally see yourself as being a student. The second stage is one of to what extent you identify with that in-group. So for you, if the in-group is student, that may be a part of your identity that you really care about, in which case you're identifying strongly with being a student. So therefore, that kind of predicts some of your behaviours in relation to this idea of being a student. That's the third stage, where you start to make comparisons between these categories. So for example, you might start to feel that you're the same as all other students, you share a sort of identity, and you're an in-group, and then you start thinking about people that are in an out-group who maybe didn't study, didn't go to university, and you start to exaggerate the differences in your mind between those out-group members and the in-group. So it has all sorts of knock-on effects for prejudice in society and how groups of people relate to each other.
So, just as people compare themselves with others, so they compare their groups. To put this another way, our self-concept is defined in relation to both other selves and other groups of selves. These forms of social comparison, together with the self-comparison that underpins them, are central to our notions of who we are.